Hello, I'm Patrick Hayes. I'm the archivist for the Redemptorist Fathers and Brothers here in the Baltimore province. We're based in Philadelphia. I'm something of a church historian as well. I've written quite a lot on Catholicism in the United States, and I've also edited an encyclopedia of immigration. So in a way, I'm fairly attached to the subject matter of this program. I've just given a talk on two individuals here at the Free Library of Philadelphia, at the main branch. The individuals were James Logan, who was a native of Armagh, and one of the early mayors of Philadelphia, secretary of William Penn. And the other individual was Matthew Carey, a Catholic from Dublin. The two are linked by one of our famous Philadelphians, Benjamin Franklin, but they're separated by a generation. The reason I spoke about these two individuals was to give people a context for Philadelphia's response to the famine and the provision of famine relief. These two individuals who come from different backgrounds, have different interests, but are still tied to their civic responsibilities, they laid the groundwork for what became Philadelphia's response to the famine. I concluded the talk by suggesting that while New York and its Irish population were largely in the forefront of responding to the needs of people both coming over and staying at home, Philadelphia is a close second. So in terms of concentration of resources, the provision of funds, the allocation of those funds for the commandeering of ships to go to various ports in Ireland, and the distribution of food that was brought over, Philadelphia comes in behind New York, but a close second. So the two individuals, maybe I'll mention them a little bit more in detail. James Logan, a late 17th century resident of Philadelphia, had both an eclectic interest in fostering of religious toleration here. So one example I gave, even though he was a Quaker and part of a large and growing Quaker community, nevertheless he was quite open to the ideas being fostered in a kind of enlightened context. Singular to the state of Pennsylvania, no other colony went along with this, with the exception of Maryland, and only later. He opened the possibility within the city's confines of having Catholics perform a public mass. So typically Catholic priests would say mass on the sly in individual homes, but under Logan's administration as mayor, he said, if Catholics want to worship freely here, they may do so, and in public. That kind of liberality or openness to new ideas, I think is suggestive of a wider cultural understanding that if people are in need, there will be a positive response to that need. And similarly, Matthew Carey comes into the picture a little bit later. Also an immigrant from Ireland, arrives in this country at an early age, just about 25 years old, and establishes his fortune really through printing presses. So after an encounter with Benjamin Franklin, he apprenticed with him for a brief while in France, and established his own printery here in the city of Philadelphia, in which he has the distinction of churning out some of the most important literature of the period. This includes not only advocacy, for instance, for women's rights in the publication of Mary Wollstonecraft's works, but also a little bit more cultural or literary in the fostering of a young poet's works, one Edgar Allan Poe. One of his signal contributions, I think, to civic life here was a twofold project. One relates to the publication in 1790 of the first Catholic Bible printed in the United States. Carey's Bible was a kind of cause célèbre. It was printed in a short run, but went to subsequent editions. And it's good to be first in anything. So having the first Catholic Bible printed from this city, a city that's becoming known for being tolerant of other ideas, I think speaks well of the man. And additionally, a few years later, in 1793, he published a very comprehensive work on the yellow fever epidemic here in Philadelphia. And this really speaks well, I think, of a man concerned with his city and its ultimate welfare. Not only did he try to trace ultimate causes of the epidemic, but he tried to memorialize the courageous fight against it among its citizens. And these two individuals, if you take them together, they sort of set the stage for an overall response of the city of Philadelphia to the famine. If you can imagine the gathering of people at the dock at Penn's Landing, on the receiving end of ship after ship of really bedraggled Irishmen coming off of these boats. Civic officials began to wonder, what are we going to do not only for these people coming to us, but at their point of origin? So initially the governor of Pennsylvania laid out a call for various Irish groups to try and get together to respond to this calamity. Two are notable. One is this Quaker Society of Friends, who formulated probably the leading relief agency in the city, the Irish Relief Society. This group not only raised money, they established a very definite scheme to get foodstuffs over to Ireland to mitigate the famine. But then also the Friendly Sons of St. Patrick's, the more Irish Catholic response. And the two of them combined were, my guess is, and this is only a guess, they worked in concert with one another. So while you had one agency collecting goods to send over, you had another agency working to gain the funding for that project.